Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 19th chapter in the book of Matthew. We took it to the exact midway point, all the way up to verse 15. We're going to take this one from 16 all the way home till 30. Now, in the first 15 verses, we read that Joshua is marching en route to his destiny with death in Jerusalem. So at this particular moment in time, he has left Galilee. This is his traditional center of ministerial operations, and he's at or near the northwestern extremity of the region of Judah, which is to the south of Samaria, which is to the south of Galilee. The Jordan River is the eastern extremity of the Promised Land. And there's people coming from all over the place, all gathering towards him to be healed, and he heals them. But then we read some Pharisees are in the midst, and they ask him a question, not with honest intent nor as sincere seekers of the truth, but trying him. And this is the question they asked: is it right for a man to put away his wife for every reason? To put away is to divorce one's wife. That's just another way of saying it. And the causes and legitimate grounds for divorce was a hot button issue in first century Jewish rabbinic rabbis, and there was certain schools of thought, which, there was the liberal one, which said that a man can divorce his wife for burning his food. And then there was the conservative one that said much of what Joshua says, don't, unless fornication and adultery is the only legitimate ground for divorce. But he takes it back even before the laws of Moses to the Garden of Eden. The second Adam brings it home to the first Adam. And he answering said to them, did you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, and join unto his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, so that they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what Elohim has joined together, let no man separate it. So he's taking back to the beginning in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were created. They were the original couple. They were the mother and father of the human race, original husband and wife. And then he quotes Genesis 2:24, which indicates the purpose of marriage. It is that a man may go and establish his own family and leave the family which he was born with, and go perpetuate the human race by procreating and establishing his own family. And he is not to become regarded as a separate being from his wife. He is to become one with her. The oneness, the unity, that means they have the same agreement. Say you have to live with this person for the rest of your life. So if you're not functioning as one person, it's not going to work out, and it's not going to be pleasant. But that is no grounds for divorce, because when you take that vow, that is not something you enter in lightly. You not only make that vow between your bride and her family, but also before God, and you cannot, if you yourself divide what Elohim has joined, then you are against him and therefore his enemy. And the Pharisees, they're sticklers for the law, and they say, why then did Moses write a bill for divorcement in the law? And he said to them, because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. So the law is not a testament to man's righteousness, but it's necessary to restrain the evil. So it was necessary because people do commit adultery. Married couples do commit adultery, and that's legitimate grounds for divorce. It's the worst case scenario, but in such a scenario, unenviable as it is, then you have every right to divorce your significant other. But divorce only became necessary because evil crept in the beginning. There was no evil, and it was just man and wife in perfect paradise. And then sin entered in, and the law became necessary to expose the sin, and the second Adam comes to redeem us from the sin. And I say to you, whoever puts away his wife, except on the grounds of whoring, and marries another, commits adultery. And whoever marries her who has been put away commits adultery. He raises the bar on divorce, much in the same way. Now, in the Sermon on the Mount, he raised the bar on adultery to he who looks at a member of the opposite sex with lust in his eye commits adultery in the heart. And so he raises the bar to on this too. So people do get divorced for things just don't work out, and there's a host of variety of excuses, and some people just are incompatible, and no two situations are exactly alike, and I just don't think divorced people should have been married to begin with. If it's an unnecessary evil, but you try and make it work out is all he's saying. And then after some in-between lines, he returns to children once more. We earlier at them in the 18th chapter, and the children are brought to him, plural, and the disciples rebuke him. They think this is a master with important things to do. He doesn't have time for little children. But Yahshua said, allow the young children to do, and do not stop them from coming to me, for such is the kingdom of heaven. And in the 18th chapter begins with a question, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Yahshua calls a little child and lifts him up and says, truly I say to you, unless you turn and become as little children, you shall by no means enter into the kingdom of heaven. Therein we learn that a childlike spirit and a child is an artless, natural believer, and therefore as such they are models that we should aspire for while cultivating salvation. 16th verse, lesson itself. This is not not a change of scenery, just another character tags along. And C1, and came said to him, good teacher, what shall I do to have everlasting life? Now this one, Matthew's account is sparse on details, but we learn from Mark's and Luke's that he was a rich young ruler. He was the ruler of a synagogue, and he approached him with an earnest question and honest intent. The good, he takes issue with the calling good. Not that he denies the claim to call or claim goodness for any human being would have been blasphemous according to contemporaneous Jewish interpretation. That term was reserved exclusively for Elohim, who alone was good and intrinsically so. For any human to claim for themselves or for any others the trait of goodness would have been positively blasphemous. But besides the deference, he doesn't deny the claim that he is good. He just wants him to have an awareness of who he's talking to. And the question he asks is legitimate and one worthy of all consideration, and he does not ask with nefarious or manipulative intent. He is a sincere seeker of truth, but tragically he does not make the most of the answer. He just doesn't respond correctly to the revelation. He got his wish. He got the answer to his questions, but he didn't like the answer. And he said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good except one, Elohim. But if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. So no one is good except one, Elohim. He is Elohim. Elohim is a team. Father Yahshua, Son Yahshua, Father Yahweh, Son Yahshua, Ruach Kadesh. But he's not denying his claim to be good or divine by connection, but he's just he wants him to have an awareness of who he's talking to. No one is good except one, Elohim. Why do you call me good? No one is good but him. Hint, I am him. He doesn't outright say it, but he answers the question. This ought not be interpreted as a legalistic endorsement of legalistic salvation. We are not saved by keeping the commandments. We keep the commandments because we are saved, but that does not procure our salvation. And the answer, the two things he asks, what shall I do to have? So the two things wrong with his question is you cannot do anything. You cannot work your way to salvation. But he does answer the question, if any of us could perfectly honor and obey the law at all times and all places, then we too could be saved. None of us can. He alone was born without sin, died without sin, and paid the sin penalty on the cross. He alone was constitutionally qualified to procure our eternal life. And eternal life is not something you inherit or earn. It is given by grace and accepted with gratitude by faith. But for the sake of argument, let's say a man human nature it was possible for any human to die without sin, then they could be saved. He said to him, which? And Yahshua said, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness. So he wants to know which of the commandments, and he who violates one violates the whole, James 2:10. We cannot cherry pick and choose our commandments, and when he reads this list of commandments, he's satisfied, and the list hasn't ended yet. So the first of which is, I think it's the order of the Decalogue. The sixth commandment is murder, seventh is adultery, eighth is steal, ninth is bear false witness, and these he could answer honestly and affirm that he had kept these since he was a lad, a youth of 13 years old. Respect your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So it returns from the ninth to the fifth commandment of the Decalogue. This is the opening one, the original righteous one. The first four are sacred. These govern and define our relationship to divinity. The righteous ones govern our behavior and interactions with others in our conduct, and the first of which is attached to a promise not mentioned here, but respect your father and your mother that you may live long in the land. And the capstone is just Leviticus 19:8, which sums up the righteous requirements of the law. If you love your neighbor as yourself, of course you're not going to murder him, you're not going to kill yourself, are you? Are you going to commit adultery if that was your wife? Just have a little empathy. You're not going to steal from anyone you love, and you're not going to spread lies and rumors and just baseless innuendo about people you love. So love is the positive element which prevents the negative outbreaks and manifestations thereof. The young man said to him, all these I have watched over from my youth. What do I still lack? So he had some confidence and ironclad certainty in his observance and his ability to obey the commandments from his youth. So we take it that he was the youth would have been 13 years old. That's when Jews were and are still bar and bat mitzvahed. I forget which one's male and which one's female, but that is their coming of age ceremony. So that's the youth term. But he still he notices, he has an awareness that something is missing, and he wants to know what it is. He's gone through the motions. He's done all the external checklist, the checklist of external requirements for observance and obeyance. He has no problem there, but he still knows he lacks something. He's not quite aware what it is, and as it is, the chink in his armor, as it is revealed, is a neglected commandment of the law. Yahshua said to him, if you want to be perfect, go and sell what you have and give to the poor, and you shall have treasure in the heavens, and come follow me. This extreme injunction ought not be interpreted as for all Christians as a commandment to sell their good. This is unique to his situation, and that was what was getting in the way of his salvation. If he wanted to be perfect, if he wanted to be worthy of eternal life, he had to get rid of the possessions in his life, because the possessions he had accumulated had possessed him. We are not told that he is rich. I believe in this writing it's just a one person, a man, no more details. This is his question, but we know that he was a rich young ruler. From the other two accounts, and his possessions possessed him. He cannot serve Elohim and Mammon, ergo his possessions, he was in violation of the tail ends, the first and the 10th. The riches had become his God. He looked to them for his chief source and supreme source of satisfaction. So anything we seek for our supreme source of satisfaction outside of Elohim becomes our substitute deity. And riches, they promise power, but they can't deliver. They cannot save from death, and you cannot take any with them. So if he had to cultivate eternity, he would have to get rid of the earthly mindset, which was geared towards the acquisitiveness and the possessiveness, and he had to give all the proceeds to the poor. So he would sell his things at face value and then give the money to the poor. He would not keep any for himself, so he had to get rid of all the items in his house, and then he would have the treasure in heaven, the treasure where moth cannot rust, where moth cannot eat and rust cannot corrupt, the imperishable treasures of the heaven, of which we are read in Matthew 6:19 through 21. And then come follow me. He says the same thing he says to all the disciples. He was calling him to be his disciple right now. And most of the come follow me's ones, Matthew, the sons of Zebedee, Peter and Andrew, they dropped their fish nets and followed him. But this one has arrives at the opposite conclusion. He counts the cost and decides it's not worth it. He was in love with his wealth. He was in love with his treasures. He was in love in his possessions, and that's the thing that got in the way from what he wanted, what he claimed to want most. He could not detach himself from the deterrent and hindrance to the blessed abode he aspired for. And when the young man heard the word, he went away sad because he had many possessions. So this is one of the rare instances in which we read that one had an encounter with Yahshua. He entered positively and left negatively. He went away sad, and the source of his sadness was the fact that he owned all these great possessions, and the sin of covetousness, that is the one that is not listed, that Yahshua did not list. He listed 5 of the 6 commandments, the first 5 of which are external observable actions, the 10th of which is that the capstone to the Decalogue is an attitude, and from that attitude precipitates actions. For instance, if you are covetous of your neighbor's wife, then you're going to commit adultery with her in the heart, if not fact. If you're covetous of his possessions, you're going to steal from him, and you're going to lie to get it, and just abuse him and just not love him. So covetousness is an attitude which prevents the full and ultimate potential of human interactions, and he had to get rid of this, and this he could not do, so he went away sad. And Yahshua said to his disciples, "Truly I say to you that it is hard for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of the heaven." So it's not impossible, but riches, the love of money itself is not evil. It is possible to have possessions without being possessed by them. It is possible to have great wealth and still have your proper priorities, to not lose sight of the primary priority, the heavenly values, even if you have on earth. But riches for the sake of riches, if that's what you're all about in life, if that is your chief pursuit, if that is your God, then you're not going to enter into kingdom of heaven. The only heaven you'll have is on earth, and it will end when you die, and you cannot take any of your wealth with you. Naked ye came into the earth, naked you shall return. Job 1:121. So it's difficult but not impossible. And again I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. So it's borderlining impossible. We have the smallest conceivable. The needle of an eye is infinitesimally small, and the camel is the largest domestic beast. They have massive humps. They're like 14 feet tall. So imagine one of those sliding through the camel of a needle. That's how difficult it is to have riches and to cultivate eternity. It invites certain temptations, and certainly some rich people can resist the temptations. You give money to certain people, and they become arrogant and just proud and everything else. But some people can possess and make wealth and remain humble, but they're the exception, not the rule. Excuse me. And when his disciples heard it, they were very astonished, saying, "Who then is able to be saved?" So the riches were considered by the ancients as a sign of divine favor, and in much of the rulers of the synagogues, they had money and they had wealth and they coveted after it. The Pharisees' covetousness, we don't know to which ecclesiastical sect, Pharisees or Sadducees, this rich young ruler belonged to, but he did come with sincere questions, and he had a genuine motivation and desire, but once he found out the answer, that motivation died. He stopped seeking, he gave up, he returned, he retreated, and wished he never came. So how many times in the Bible do we read that a man had one chance? He had 1 hour with God, and he missed it. Or he had 1 hour with God, and he made the most of it. Look at Zacchaeus, Luke 19, and compare and contrast the rich young ruler to his encounter, the one recorded encounter with the Word incarnate, God in the flesh, who pitched his tent among men. And he did not make the most of it, and The disciples want to know who can be saved. If if rich people were divinely favored and they can't be saved, then who among us can? And looking intently, Yahshua said to them, with men this is impossible, but with Elohim all is possible. That he was looking is implied, but also or inferred, but also how he was looking. He was looking intently. He was looking them dead square in the eye, intently, making eye contact, making sure that they heard what he said. He's looking intently with purpose and design for them to hear what he says. And what he has to say is that with men this is impossible, but with Elohim all is possible. We also read this in Luke 1:37. The angel Gabriel assures the virgin vessel, his mother Mary, that she would conceive through the impartation and the impregnation of the Ruach Kadesh, and the shadow of the Most High would overwhelm her. But we don't want to impose any limitation. Our God is as great as we make him, or as weak as we imagine him. He can only. Don't put any limitation. Now, it's an oversimplification to say that all things are possible for God to do. He cannot contradict his sacred nature, his eternal nature, or anything like that, because in him no iniquity dwells. But everything we could possibly hope for is made possible through him in our submission thereto. Then Peter answered and said to him, see, we have left all and followed you. What then shall we have? Peter's taking note that they had forsaken their fish nets when he called them. Matthew had forsaken his tax collector's belt, and they had lived homeless, wandering, itinerant preachers without salary or commission, dependent on the charity of strangers. And they left all. They had businesses, they had homes. Peter had a wife. And we don't read of her, at least on the journeys when he's following him. And he wants to know what reward can I expect for my due diligence and humble service. And Yahshua said to him, truly I say to you, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his esteem, you who have followed me in the restoration shall also sit on the 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. That's a pretty extraordinary promise, and the 24 elders of Revelation 24, I personally think, as I've explained in that video, the 24 are the 12 patriarchs of the tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles, so they are right there right now in the very presence of divinity, and to them is ceded the prerogative and the privilege of judging the 12 tribes of Israel at that final day. So they are exalted as apostles above the prophets and the patriarchs in the kingdom. So these 12 obscure, ordinary, unschooled, unlettered peasants are in fact exalted in heaven as we speak. These ordinary, obscure fishermen, uneducated nobodies, obscure anonymities, the ones that the world overlooked until the Spirit worked wonders through them. But this is when the Son of Man sits on the throne, and he had to die, be buried, resurrected, then ascended, and he is there now at the right hand of the throne of the Father. And everyone who has left house or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or lands for my name's sake shall receive 100-fold and shall inherit an eternal lasting life. So if we love our brothers or sisters or family members, we are commanded to hate them in comparison to the love that we bear the Messiah in Luke Luke 14:26, and he's not advocating literal hatred for our family. He's only suggesting by comparison that the love that we have for them should be as hatred for them. So there may come a time in your Christian calling when the sword of division divides the father from the son and the brother from the brother, and you have to, leave your house and leave your family and come follow him for his name's sake and not your own. So broken homes that are not gospel-induced are not commended or endorsed. But the abundance is manifold and multifold and 100-fold, 100 times what you once had, what you have now. Well, you will have 100-fold, and you will inherit most importantly, eternal life. That is the question that is asked by the rich young ruler who tragically departed in sorrow because he knew that the cost of discipleship was too much for him to pay. He didn't want to pay the price. But many who are first shall be last, and the last first. The rich young ruler was certainly first. He had a stellar reputation, good obedience to the commandments, power, influence, prestige. He was the ruler of his own synagogue, and he was young. So he had a lot of potential and, the whole world ahead of him, but he was last. He responded, he made the wrong decision in the answer that he had asked. He got it and he made the wrong decision. But the disciples, they were last. They were unlettered, unschooled, obscure nobodies. They did not have the rabbinical credentials. These were unschooled, unlettered men, but they were first. They are exalted in the throne room of heaven as we speak, where they await us. And we can read Revelation 4 for on that. This is just the perfect paradox. Many who are first shall be last. The thief on the cross had been a reprobate, and he died a reprobate, but he acknowledged his sin and his Savior in that dying moment of time and said, Master, remember me. And he assured him that today thou shalt be with me in paradise. So never overlook anyone who is down and defeated and the losers and the outcasts and the ostracized of the world. They may be more exalted than you. There's going to be a lot of surprises on the day of judgment. A lot of people who were last and low and least and lost are going to be exalted, and a lot of people who are on top of the world are going to be in the bottom of hell. And that's just the way it is. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.